the Unitarian Universalist Westside Congregation in Rio Rancho. We are glad that you are able to join us for today's service. I am the Reverend Dr. Nancy Hitt, Consulting Minister for this congregation and Service Associate. Our primary speaker today is David Kuhn. Our program today is titled The Evolution of God. It is based on the book by Robert Wright of the same title. I expect we will also hear David's voice coming through clearly as he shares his thoughts about this with us. Our service is based on UU Principle number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, and Source 5, humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. We hope your understanding of these will deepen as a result of today's service. Our thanks today especially go to Carol Eaglehart, our videographer. Carol is responsible for putting the finished video that you are viewing together after the rest of us have all done our thing. If this is your first visit to Westside, we welcome you. We are glad that you found us, whether you were cruising online or actively seeking us out. We hope that you check our Facebook page often and take advantage of our YouTube page to view other services. Each one is very different from the other, although you will certainly notice some common elements every week also. If you have questions or comments, you may post them to our Facebook page or email me directly at ministeruuwc@gmail.com. We look forward to being able to become better acquainted. Here are the announcements for today. This past Sunday, last week, saw the start of our first online class. David Kuhn is leading a discussion of Phillip Hewitt's book, The Unitarian Way. Class happens at 9:45 on Sunday morning. If you would like more information, please email either David or myself. We also saw the first gathering of our new social media team happen this past week. You will be hearing a lot more about Facebook and how to maximize its use on our behalf in the near future. If you have ideas or suggestions for how we could better use Facebook, please email me. This is a use it or lose it phenomenon. The more we use Facebook, the more it does for us. Now that meeting online is an extended reality, using Facebook well has become very important. You will have received a link to UUWC's Facebook pages in this past week's email. Please use it a lot. Lastly, or almost lastly, a short reminder that Rio the dog still needs your recycled newspapers. The collection bin is on the patio outside the social hall door. Please be careful to replace the bricks securing the lid after dropping your contribution off. Rio and her owner thank you. We also thank all of you who dropped off your donation to Storehouse West last Sunday. As soon as we have the information, I will let you know how many pounds of food we donated. It's time now to light our chalice, a custom many UUs observe when gathered together. If you have a personal chalice or candle at home, draw it closer to you now. Please join me in the words as they appear on your screen as we light our chalices together. Ancient people learned to contain and use fire. Today we light our chalice flame to honor the stories of our origins, to illuminate our current experiences, and to inspire our future. Shalom and amen. Please join me now in affirming our aspirations as the words appear on your screen. Life is a gift. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, to the end that all souls grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Shalom. I invite you now to enter into a moment of centering with me. We invite you to use this time to empty your mind of tension and worry and to open yourself to the messages of our time together. So sit back comfortably in your seat, wherever you are. Close your eyes gently if you are comfortable doing so. Uncross your ankles, knees, wrists. Let your awareness sink down into yourself, coming to rest on your breathing. Pay attention to your breathing, letting your mind go blank, simply hearing the inspiration of each breath, feeling the release of each breath out. Breathe deeply in and out, fully expanding your diaphragm, resting in the rhythm of your own breath. Into the stillness of your mind, let a series of pictures of yourself appear. You as a baby. You as a young child. You going to school. Growing taller and stronger. Picture yourself getting your first job, entering into your first relationship of adult love. Picture yourself passing on the wisdom from your life to someone else. Picture yourself as you are now. And if it occurs to you, picture yourself growing into your future. Then take those last images of yourself now and in the future and tuck them into your mind, bringing them back with you as you refocus your awareness on your breathing, slow and steady, in and out. And when you are ready, open your eyes. Shalom. It is our custom to share personal and communal joys and concerns with each other, and to light a candle for each one. This helps reinforce the connections among us and brings us to a stronger sense of community. If you have a personal joys and concerns candle you would like to light, draw it closer to you now. You will be invited to light it as we light our final white candle together. and I am very pleased to report that I have several joys to share with you today. I was able to meet online via video chat with both Robert and Bobby last week. Both of them are currently residing in extended care facilities, and I am happy to report that they are both doing quite well. Robert looked great. His pandemic-inspired full beard is very becoming. His spirits are very good, and Nancy has been able to have window visits with him because he was moved to a room with a view. They speak daily by phone, and Nancy taps on his window and visits with him in person, but behind the glass from time to time. It was great to see him online, and he passes his greetings to all of you. I also met with Bobby at her facility via Zoom. She, too, is sporting a new longer hairdo since their usual beautician is unable to visit during the pandemic. I am pleased to say that she has fond memories of Westside and also asked to be remembered here. I promised we'd light a candle for her. I have to say that it was great to hear her both giggle and full-out laugh during the course of our phone call. We also hold concern today for all those who are sick, either with the COVID-19 virus or with anything else. We hold concern for those who are grieving, both those who are grieving the loss of loved ones to the virus and those who are grieving in this difficult time for other reasons. We hold concern for those who are anxious about work and whether or not they'll continue to have a job, anxious about the restrictions and changes the pandemic imposes, anxious about coping with all the changes the pandemic has wrought. We hold a special concern for those responsible for making decisions for our schools, for teachers, for students, and for parents. We offer our thoughts and prayers that the decisions made will facilitate the safe education of our children. For their teachers and the administrators and food and cleaning staff and all others who make the school programs work, we hold concern. For all of the joys and concerns that remain unspoken in the silence of our hearts, we light this last white candle and invite you to light yours at home, too. For all the victims of racial violence, for those injured by words and deeds and attitudes and institutionalized habits, we light this red candle to acknowledge their suffering and to honor their lives. Shalom. And now, Bram Cast-Hecht will share our animal ministry moment with us.
Hello. I had a special request to do a little horse poem or story, so I found something quite amusing I thought you might get a kick out of. You know you're a horse person when you yell at the kids and the horse's name pops out. You tell the guy at the service station that you've got a leak in the rear hind tire. You find hay in your bathrobe. You cluck at your car when it goes up the hill. You know more about your horse's ancestry than your own. You spend hundreds of dollars to compete in a horse show for a 98-cent ribbon. Now this other poem is a little dog, and you will see the picture of him, but I must say that he has torn a cushion to smithereens. He says next time you'll think twice before you go away after I asked you to sit and stay. And now Reverend Nancy will share our moment for all ages.
Our moment for all ages today is titled Terry the pteranodon teaches evolution. Who better than a dinosaur to do that? Now, this is my friend Terry. Terry has wings and really funky eyes and a crested head. And Terry at this point is very soft and lovable. However, even though you look at Terry and think, a winged dinosaur. I know, we all think that when we look at you. Terry is technically not a dinosaur, but is part of the dinosaur family tree. Technically, Terry and all other pteranodons are like siblings, sisters to dinosaurs. But most of us see Terry and we look at Terry and say, dinosaur with wings even. Terry was one of the largest winged reptiles ever. 23 feet worth of wings. They would fill this sanctuary space, and there would be no way I would be standing here beside Terry if we had 23 feet of wings here. And Terry is also toothless. As you can see, there are no teeth in this big long beak. In fact, the name pteranodon means winged and toothless. And Terry, when full grown, would have weighed about 37 pounds. That's a really big bird. Now, Terry wants to share some information with us today about evolution. You see, there are no more pterodons alive on Earth today. Instead, there are creatures who evolved from other ancient creatures like Terry. Terry would like us to know what that means. So, basically, evolution is a developmental process in which different kinds of life change and adapt in order to continue living, hopefully at a more advanced level. So, evolution means change. It also means that life goes on. Terry especially wants us to know, yes, that each step of the process is important. Terry was very important for about 150 million years. Not that any particular pteranodon lived for 150 million years, but the species did. That's nothing to sneeze at, even if all the pteranodons are gone today. The closest relatives to Terry that are alive on Earth today are birds and crocodiles. And I don't know how you put those two things together, but scientists do, and that's what they say. So birds and crocodiles can thank Terry and all of the other pteranodons for their existence. Now, Terry and other pteranodons actually lived very near us. Yes, they lived a very long time ago, but in Kansas, Alabama, Nebraska, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Yes, Wyoming. Terry says there are two primary ways that pteranodons have left a legacy through evolution for us. The first is that there are amazingly detailed fossils that show us what pteranodons actually looked like, and studying them helps us understand how life developed on our planet. Yes, and that's very important. And the second is that pteranodons have made a comeback. Witness Terry. Some of them are even movie stars. There are videos and movies in which pteranodons have starring roles. Who knew, huh? Seriously. So even though they are gone from our concrete reality, they are alive in our abstract imaginations and our thinking. And apparently, at least according to us, they are quite talented. They sing, they dance, they're very playful. You may be familiar with cartoons and stuffed animals that look a lot like Terry. They've become really quite popular. Terry thinks that makes perfect sense. So, Terry says, even if something seems like it's dead or extinct, You never know when it will cycle back with whole new layers of meaning. And that makes evolution an ever-changing process, even more fascinating than if it was just a step-by-step linear change. Thanks to the evolution of ideas in radical ways, the pteranodon are still with us. So I think we need to thank Terry for making this appearance and allow Terry to go back down into the ever-popular hidey hole in the lectern and retire for the moment. And now, Carol Eaglehart will offer us a video visit with George Oppenheimer.
Today, I'm catching up with one of our oldest members, George Oppenheimer. He shares his home with his cats.
I have 4 cats. One is the mother of the other 3 that were born at the same time. The mother is a totally black cat. The black cat had never been owned by anybody, did not wish to be touched by any human, until it got to go in and out of our house to eat with my cat. And finally became aware of my being a reasonable creature, provided I wasn't standing or walking. If I was sitting or lying down, it permitted itself to come close, but not to be touched. But in time, it began to sleep on the bed with my cat, with me. One night at 3 a.m, I hear a yelp out of that black cat, and I'm awakened, and I want to know what's happening. And there are 3 kittens on my bed, newly born. And the 3 little cats grew up and are now, of course, grown cats. My original cat that I came here with has since passed away when he was 18. But the other 4 are my family to this day.
Each week, we take a moment to say thanks for your gifts of love and commitment. It matters hugely that your promises and commitments are kept, and that we can keep our metaphorical doors open. As always, we continue to have regular expenses. The bank, the power company, insurance company, etc., all need to be paid, even though we're not occupying the pews the way we used to. Thank you for fulfilling your pledge and for all the gifts of love and support that have enabled us to maintain our vitality in new ways. You may send your contribution either to Post Office Box 15146 in Rio Rancho, or use the PayPal button on our website. Again, thank you for sustaining Westside. And now, David Kuhn will speak to the evolution of God with us.
Hello and good morning. My name is Dave Kuhn, and I am the presenter at this morning's service. My presentation is called The Early Evolution of God. I stuck in the word early for reasons you'll find out later. And it's based on a book called The Evolution of God, authored by Professor Robert Wright, who teaches at Princeton and the University of Pennsylvania, and who has written many scholarly books dealing with religion, Christianity, and psychology. The main thesis of the book is that the Abrahamic God, the God of Judaism, of Christianity, and Islam, was something that evolved over time. That is, that it didn't all appear all at once. I present the ideas in Robert Wright's book here, but I have to say that I'm only going to present a part of them. I only have time to present the very first part of his book that deals mainly with the Old Testament. In making my presentation, I do not wish to try to convince you of any of the ideas in Robert Wright's book. I just found the book to be very interesting, and I thought it might be interesting for the congregation and perhaps a bit thought-provoking as well. I also have to note that the book is quite scholarly in that it supports its views with a lot of very good reasoning and a lot of documentation. And there isn't time for me to do justice to all of that documentation and all of the good reasoning that goes on in the book. I can't even cover everything that Professor Wright says in the first part of his book. So I only address some of the book's highlights and more interesting points. And I hope really that you like my glorified book report. Professor Wright starts out with the earliest precursor of religion, which is animism. We've studied animism here at Westside in one of our religious education classes. Animism is basically the idea that everything, all plants and all animals, have a spirit, and even some non-living things like mountains or rivers have spirits as well. Animism isn't really a religion in and of itself so much as it is a way of looking at things. According to Professor Wright, animism made sense in terms of evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychology is a branch of psychology that attempts to explain useful mental and psychological traits, such as memory or perception or language. It explains these things in terms of adaptations. That is, they are functions of Darwinian natural selection. So, how does animism make sense in this context? Well, Professor Wright reasons that humans who were better at cause and effect reasoning survived better and had a better chance of getting their genes into the next generation. So in early hunter-gatherer societies where animism existed, most of the interactions anyone would have was with another person, given the close personal context that existed in those societies. So, if I'm mean to Igor, others will notice and be less willing to deal with me, and Igor may not share his meat with me. And if I'm nice to Greta, other people will notice and be more willing to deal with me, and perhaps Greta will allow me to use her wood shaping tool. So the hunter-gatherers applied their in-person cause and effect reasoning to the environment in which they lived. So if I killed a deer, I would thank the deer for giving me its bounty, in the hopes that other deer spirits would notice and perhaps give me some of their bounty in the future. Perhaps animism isn't entirely dead today. Has no one ever talked to a computer? I know that I've talked to traffic lights that didn't turn green just exactly when I wanted them to. I have a friend who I knew many years ago that had a story that kind of pertains here. Now, he half-jokingly told me this story. He was in charge of all the computers in his work area, and he had one computer that just would not behave. So Dave, my colleague, made a cardboard cutout of himself. And in this cardboard cutout was a big grimace on his face and a very large screwdriver in his right hand. Now, Dave swore that once he put that cutout in front of the monitor, that computer never misbehaved again. So, maybe animism isn't entirely dead, and maybe not entirely ineffective either. The next steps in religious development occurred with the rise of clans and chiefdoms. This rise of clans and chiefdoms came about in part because of the development of agriculture, which allowed people to have a more dependable food supply, which would support larger and larger groups. Whereas hunter-gatherer societies had maybe 40 people or so, clans and chieftains might have hundreds or even thousands of people scattered over a much wider geographical area. Larger clans and chieftains tended to survive better than the smaller hunter-gatherer societies. One of the things that happened in clans and chieftains was a greater degree of specialization. One person might be better at making weapons, and another might be more skilled at making clothing. So there tended to be cooperation among the various specialists. Groups that were psychologically more inclined to cooperate, to engage in cooperative or non-zero-sum transactions where each party benefited, these survived better than others. I think we're all familiar with zero-sum transactions, like when we go and haggle over a car's price with a car dealer. If the car price goes down, we win and the dealer loses. And if the price goes the other way, the winners and losers change as well. But the net outcome, when you look at both parties' benefit, is zero. One party is a minus, one party is a plus. In clans, we had this greater degree of specialization. One of the kinds of specialization was the shaman. The shaman was especially good at dealing with the spirits that inhabited the local community. And this was a step in the religious development that eventually led to the existence of an Abrahamic God. The next major theological development was the rise of gods in polytheistic religious belief systems. This occurred at about the same time as hierarchies were developing within the tribes or chieftains, perhaps reflecting the political hierarchies in societies. Gods were often in a hierarchy as well. One god might be a creator god, or one god might be a forest god that ruled over all the trees or over all the tree spirits. Another parallel between the chieftain's political structure and their theology was the specialization of gods. In various primitive societies, there were gods for carpenters, thatchers, canoe builders, and even hairdressers. So specialization among society members was paralleled by specialization among the gods. Another development in theology happened because it was becoming impractical for any given person in a clan to deal with misbehavior by other persons in the clan, due to there being hundreds or thousands of people scattered over a wide area. So chiefs and their subordinates began enforcing appropriate behavior. At the same time, gods began to have a moral element. They desired behavior that not only glorified themselves, but also led to better relations among their worshipers. Professor Wright's view is that societies with better internal cooperation caused by political structure and theology survived better. Hence, these societies and their gods thrived and survived in a Darwinian sense. The next major step in the development of theology occurred with the rise of states or state-like entities. Of particular importance to the Abrahamic religions is the rise of states or city-states in Mesopotamia. In ancient Mesopotamia, cities tended to have their own local gods who were regarded, at least locally, as being the most important or powerful. But here it is significant that there was a lot of interaction among the Mesopotamian states. There was trade, cultural influences, intermarriage, political maneuvering, conquest, and war. This interaction led people to tolerate each other's beliefs and gods and ways, perhaps in part because one must have some degree of tolerance for one's trading partners or potential family members. This cooperative context is the context in which Yahweh or Jehovah rose to great prominence. So how did Yahweh rise to prominence? Of course, Professor Wright's book does not give the traditional religious answers. And in answering this question, how did Yahweh rise to prominence, Wright notes a few things about Yahweh's history. He notes that in the first millennium before the Common Era, when the book of Genesis was written, that God, Jehovah, was concrete in the flesh. He planted the Garden of Eden. He walked through the garden. He made garments of skin for Adam and Eve. Here, Jehovah, or Yahweh, is strikingly like the primitive gods of hunter-gatherer societies. He is somewhat human with superpowers. Professor Wright also notes that the Old Testament recognizes the existence of other gods besides Yahweh. Yahweh is not alone. For example, in the book of Genesis in chapter 1, it recalls a time when a bunch of male deities came down from the heavens and had sex with attractive female humans. These gods, quote, went unto the daughters of humans and had children with them, unquote. These children were, quote, the heroes of old, warriors of renown, unquote. Additionally, in Exodus, we have the commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me, as opposed to, I am the only God. In Genesis chapter 1, it says, God says, let us make man in our own image, in our own likeness. And in Genesis chapter 11, it says, after Adam and Eve have eaten the forbidden fruit, God speaks and says, behold, they have become like one of us. The plural pronoun us is significant. Perhaps it suggests that God, Jehovah, was speaking to equals. Wright points out some other aspects of history involving Yahweh. There is evidence that the Israelites themselves were Canaanites. They arrived in the land in Canaan by peaceful means, as settlers who mingled with those who were there before. This is evidenced by Canaanite texts and artifacts unearthed by archaeologists in recent decades. And it's likely that Yahweh was part of the Canaanite pantheon and rose to prominence from there. And as Yahweh grew more prominent, other gods were demoted in importance. Many became mere aspects of Yahweh, or some, like the name of the god of pestilence, became synonyms for their particular phenomenon. But during this time, Yahweh didn't just become more prominent. He became more ethereal as well. This is illustrated by the biblical story in which the prophet Elijah is on Mount Sinai, communing with God. God tells Elijah, stand there. Elijah does so. And then there comes a great fire. But Elijah does not see God in the fire. Then there comes a great thunderstorm. But Elijah doesn't see God in the thunderstorm either. And finally there comes a great earthquake, and Elijah doesn't see God there either. After all of this, there is a still voice of God that speaks to Elijah. The upshot is that Yahweh is not in or bound by the fire, not in or bound by the storms or the earthquakes. He is greater, more abstract, and he is above all of these things, and he rules them. So Yahweh has evolved from a human-like anthropomorphic God that we see in Genesis to a more ephemeral, elusive God that many worship today. In accordance with Wright's views, there is a point at which Yahweh grows to become the national God of Israel. Of course, the Old Testament says that Yahweh was always the God of Israel, from the time, at least, when the Israelites escaped from Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, and wandered in the desert for 40 years, in the wilderness for 40 years. But Professor Wright's view is that Yahweh became the God of Israel gradually over time. Professor Wright, as I view his book, proposes at least a partial reason or factor that contributed to Yahweh becoming the God of Israel. He begins by noting that Israel existed among a group of nations that were geographically close together in the ancient Fertile Crescent. There was in the Fertile Crescent then a minor version of the globalization effect that we see in modern times. Then, as now, there were certain more cosmopolitan, internationalist people or organizations that benefited from trade and other interaction among nations. In modern times, a business person or a company may acquire foreign goods or foreign labor and thereby make a profit. But then there are local companies or laborers or workers who are thereby disadvantaged. So there arises a grassroots movement that opposes foreign influences, and this movement can have great political influence. It can gain quite a clout. So it was in ancient Israel as well. And the locals in ancient Israel disliked foreigners and anything about them, including their gods. So there were a lot of Israelites who clung to Yahweh, who had arisen in Israel. And ultimately, these particular Israelites prevailed, and Yahweh became the God of Israel. In this vein, Professor Wright notes that often in the Old Testament, when the Israelites are called for devotion to Yahweh, there is a nationalistic aspect to the call. At some point in Wright's view, Yahweh morphs a bit more. He becomes the God of all people, not just the God of Israel. Accordingly, by the time we get to the latter part of the book of Isaiah, God becomes concerned with the welfare of all peoples, not just the Israelites. Professor Wright offers an interesting theory that may at least partly explain how this happened. This theory has to do with the conquest of Israel by the Babylonian Empire. At that time, not only did Israel suffer military defeat, and not only was the temple in Jerusalem destroyed, but many, if not most, Israelite citizens were exiled from Israel into Babylon. This was all Yahweh's punishment for the Israelites not worshiping him properly. And this punishment was horrifically traumatic to the Israelites. So, how did the Israelites react? Well, they reacted similarly to a modern person who drives his car while drunk and wrecks his car. That person might well resolve never to drink again as a result of the trauma of losing the car. But what if that very same person drives drunk and in doing so causes the death of his or her son? This is a much more traumatic event. and this person may well resolve to make it his or her mission in life to convince everyone else never to drive drunk, lest they suffer the same fate that they did. In like vein, the Israelites, looking at the great traumatic event that they went through during their exile, might well have thought, we don't want any nation to ever go through this again just like we did. They would endeavor to get other nations to worship Yahweh so that Yahweh would not punish them like he did the Israelites. And did Yahweh have the power to do this? Well, after all, we might ask that question because Israel, the nation that God protected, had been defeated. But the reasoning goes like this. A God who could use the whole Babylonian Empire as an instrument to punish the Israelites must be a very powerful God indeed. And so it came to pass that Yahweh's reign extended to all peoples, not just the Israelites. Now, the talk that I have given only has gone through the Old Testament. And as I mentioned, Wright's book covers the theological development or evolution, using those terms advisedly, of the Abrahamic God also in the New Testament and in Islam. But there is not time to go into those things now, lest this service go on and on. But I hope this presentation has been interesting. Hopefully it may provoke some thoughts and may be enlightening. As a final word in my talk, I'd like to share a word that Professor Wright has not only about Abrahamic religions, but all successful religions. He says that successful religions all have a great deal of internal cooperation. They help build increasingly larger and more successful societies that are more survivable and more tolerant. So, in today's global interconnectedness, we are facing challenges that confronted successful religions in the past. They had to convert people that didn't necessarily originally belong to that religion. They might have had to cross national boundaries. Wright says that there is a long-term historical tendency, admittedly with backward steps, to find spiritual and social unity. There is hope that religion, or perhaps human perceptions of deity, will evolve sufficiently quickly to avoid mankind expiring from biowarfare, nuclear disaster, or failure to cooperate during a global medical crisis. There is hope. Shalom.
As always, we invite your thoughtful responses and remarks. You may leave your feedback on our Facebook page or email either myself or David directly. Thank you. And now it is time to extinguish our chalices. Please extinguish yours safely at home as ours is extinguished here, joining me in the words on your screen as we do so. Gone from sight like the distant past, our chalice flame still warms our hearts and inspires our minds. May we continue to grow in the truths found in its light, now and forever. Shalom and blessed be. May your personal evolution mirror the patterns of life we find in the universe. May it be a thing of beauty, responding and adapting, changing and sustaining each new development as it arises in your life. Through everything, may you grow ever more alive. Go now in peace. May the spirit of love surround you everywhere you go, whoever you are with, and however you have need. Shalom and blessed be.